broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is Wilms Front, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Wilms Front for a fresh featured interview program, returning to a regular Sunday night slot on this 22nd of September 2024. We're broadcasting live on the Wilms Front YouTube channel, the Wilms Front Odyssey channel, and the Wilms Front Rumble channel. It is 9 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. My guest tonight to discuss Australia's political and economic future, with a federal election coming up and the nation in a per capita recession, is economist and political strategist Burchell Wilson. But fear not, he is not one of these safe and boring ones. He is based as fuck, so much so that the political and media establishment tried to cancel him 10 years ago, but all that did was liberate him to speak more bluntly about what policies Australia actually needs to jolt itself out of its decline, and how the political and media class are betraying the interests of Australians every day. He ran for the seat of Bathurst at the 2023 New South Wales state election for the Libertarian Party when they were known as the Liberal Democrats. Burchell, welcome to Wilms Front.
It's a pleasure to be here. I understand I also have a license to swear, which I will promise to use judiciously. So bear with me.
Yes, YouTube, which is the primary platform we're on, it allows swear words, but you're not allowed to talk too much about jabby jabs, if you know what I mean.
Oh, look, okay, gotcha. So that's not really my core focus anyway, so someone else can do that.
Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, you were supposed to be cancelled when you were sacked as the chief economist for the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry in 2014 because someone leaked some spicy things you had said on social media, and there was a Guardian, ABC article, the usual crowd. They all decided to an avalanche of articles about you.
Right. So no one really cared what I said outside of the Canberra Press Gallery, and the only reason the Canberra Press Gallery cared about what I said was because they were trying to get me fired. And why were they trying to get me fired? Because I was speaking out about $38 billion in subsidies for renewable energy companies under the renewable energy target from 2014 to 2030, which made no sense and still don't, and are still underpinning the commercial viability of these uneconomic wind turbines and solar farms that you're propping up all over the country. So that's a potted snapshot of what happened to me in short, but we can go into that in length if you have any interest. And it's a really, really sinister story. It's really ugly. It demonstrates precisely what's wrong with Australia's public policy debate and the people who report it, namely the Canberra Press Gallery, the journalists, and the editors who sign off on this crap. It's just appalling.
I'll ask you first. You all these years later regret any of what you said, like, or what they seized upon you, called Joe Hockey a fat little bastard. And
there's more anodyne than I called him a little fat bastard, and it's a term of endearment. And when I met Joe Hockey about 4 years later in the US at the Australian Embassy in DC, he had no idea it had even happened. I think even at the time, if it had been said to him to his face, he wouldn't have cared. You have a pretty thick skin if you're a politician. The only people who cared was this fuckwit, Mark Bretherton at the Clean Energy Council, who hacked into my Facebook account, ransacked about 12 to 18 months worth of posts I'd made, tried to find anything he could use to get me fired, and sent that to the Canberra Press Gallery on the morning that the Warburton Review was due to report, copying in my boss at the time, Kate Carnell, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, trying to get me fired, trying to get me lit up in the press, and having a huge amount of success doing that, purely on the basis of a couple of tongue-in-cheek remarks amongst friends that were probably inadvisable. He managed to track them down. I think at that point I only had about 165 friends on Facebook, sort of using it to vent from time to time, running a sort of dark satire on my life in Canberra as a sort of centre-right free market economist, dealing with the idiots in the Canberra Press Gallery and the mendacious renewable energy industry, including the wind industry. The wind industry, just the worst of all of them. They are just, it's this toxic combination of corporate welfare, green left activism, and a complete lack of accountability. They are just some of the worst people in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And the way they've conducted themselves and their advocacy is despicable. And I'm just sick of it. I've never told the full story, and it's kind of first venture to doing that. I'm not sure what sort of audience you have. I spelled out some of the details of this to a conference in Oberon on energy policy recently, about 4 weeks ago, and no one said, "Oh, that's too bad." So people are just horrified that this could be done to someone, and the manner in which it's done. And the only people who've actually expressed any enthusiasm for it have been people in the Canberra Press Gallery. A guy called Andrew Green, bumped into him in the Senate in 2019. Said, "Look, you know what happened to me, right?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I thought that was great. We should see more of that." Well, fuck you, Andrew Green, and fuck the Canberra Press Gallery. Who are these people? They're barely employable liberal arts graduates. They have no idea about economic policy. They have no idea about legal frameworks. They're just really low rent individuals who presume to commentate on Australia's public policy conversation. I tuned into Insiders for about half an hour this morning. They're idiots. They really are that bad. And the number of economists in this country, it's not large. You've only got about 3,000 people who practice this discipline, and most of those are either academics or work for government. So someone in my position back in the day at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, with public profile as an advocate for small business and predominantly aligned with good public policy, we're vanishingly small in number. And that's why you get targeted. And it's not just me. They've gone after other economists as well. So they're increasingly brazen. The success they had in my case has just, it's intensified the attack patterns of the leftists. So that's where we are at the moment. I was one of the first to go over the falls, and it's just gotten worse and worse, and it'll continue to get worse until people start pushing back.
Well, my audience finds cancel culture appalling and would probably find other things you said quite funny. What was the other thing that was reported that you said on Facebook, that moderate Muslims provide a smokescreen for Muslims who are putting bombs on your buses and raping your children? That's obviously quite a blunt, in-your-face comment.
Well, the whole thing about that that wasn't even something I said. That was just something I reposted. And the reason I reposted it was the first half of that had quite a sophisticated comment about free speech and the Islamic world. Just happened to trail off into a bit of a diatribe, which I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the rest of that statement either. So, and it's just interesting. I repost things if I find them interesting or thought provoking, and that's enough. You're not allowed to think a certain way. You're not even allowed to think about thinking a certain way. So people, when they post stuff publicly or when they write on their Twitter bio or LinkedIn profile that their views don't reflect those of their employer or necessarily their views, then no, that's not going to get them out of jail for free. Not at all. That's just something people say to try and protect themselves. You'll be strung up for anything you repost, if you believe it or don't believe it. So you can be strung up over anything these days, and that's why this cancel culture has no legitimacy. If there were a process, if there were some sort of standard, but there's nothing. It's just a pure exercise in political power. It's hugely asymmetrical politically, and it always comes down on the side of logic, reason, and typically that means conservatives in terms of being leveled against them.
Now, for those who don't know, the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry CEO at the time, Kate Carnell, what is it? She used to be known as Katie Carnell, because she was also known as that as well. She's one of these really woke SJW business women, even though she was a liberal ACT chief minister in the 90s.
Yeah, not much of one. She did kill a kid during that period, a 12-year-old girl.
How?
Yeah, do you don't remember that? How old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay. Well, I'm old enough to remember. So the old Canberra hospital, she arranged an implosion and she decided to make it a public spectacle. So everyone was told to line up around the lake and watch the hospital be imploded. And instead of imploding, the people who were responsible for that demolition, it became an explosion, and a piece of shrapnel shot out across the lake and struck this poor girl in the head, Katie Bender.
Yeah.
She's 12 years old, and she died. A range of other people were injured. And that was Kate Carnell's brilliant idea. We'll arrange for a big chunk of Canberra to stand by the lake while we have an explosion. So I don't know if that passes any sort of sniff test, but Teflon Kate just rolled on, didn't seem to phase her very much, didn't seem to have many implications for her career. And she's one of these people who she has a job for 18 months, maybe 2 years at the outside, and then just moves on. A wildly destructive individual, deceitful, manipulative, and everything that's wrong with Australia's political class. She's the worst people in politics, the liberal moderates. They don't stand for anything beyond themselves. And outside the liberal moderates, it's only the hard left that come close to being that toxic and that destructive.
And one of the other things that was bad that you said online, that you attacked rival business group, the Business Council of Australia. Now, there's another one also, the Australian Industry Group. So there's three main business lobby groups. Explain to my audience what's their purpose, how are they different? Because obviously their goal is to, well, not just lobby, but also get their heads on the news in the newspapers to put forward their position.
Yeah, so the Business Council of Australia, if I'm not mistaken, was set up in the 80s, largely at the instigation of Hugh Morgan. So basically, top end of town, CEOs of large corporates. And at its instigation, it was actually quite successful and quite influential in the 80s and 90s. The Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry has a history stretching back almost to federation through the chambers of commerce and industry, predominantly small and medium-sized businesses. So they tend to have a lot in common with your average mums and dads. So strong emphasis on good public policy, lower taxes, less regulation, less government spending. And AIG has a large manufacturing base. So a lot of the policy asks it tends to put forward are focused around protection for manufacturing. And I mean, some of it does align with the broader business community and the public interest in terms of industrial relations. And Innes Willox has been better than most over the last...
better than the previous one, Heather Ridout. I don't know whether she was just a sucker or she was trying to rent seek.
Oh, the thing about a lot of these people is they're careerists. So it's not so much Heather Ridout as Heather Sellout, and it's all about her career, trying to advance her standing. So I think she's got some appointment with the superannuation fund.
Oh
Janice
yeah, that's very lucrative. Get paid to invest our money that's compulsory taken from us.
Yeah, and I don't know that these people are particularly insightful when it comes to their ability to carry out their responsibilities as whatever the role they have in these funds. They're given these sinecures because of their political connections, or because they come from the trade union movement, or they're heads of industry associations. And quite often, especially the union guys, they have no basic finance or economics credentials at all. They just sit in these roles and have absolutely nothing to contribute, and they're just gifted these positions. So it's actually quite egregious, and you can go away and look up these people's bios online, look at the positions they hold, and no one seems to care very much because they're part of the political class, so they're immune from any sort of accountability or any sort of responsibility. They're just gifted these sinecures because of who they are and where they've been in the political ecosystem.
And now you still provide political consulting and campaigning services. So what makes your advice better than, say, Hawker Britton on the Labor side or Crosby Textor on the Liberal side? Why should people hire you for political campaigns, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I try not to get too involved in political campaigns because I've got a day job I really should be focusing my attention on. The problem with me is I do actually believe things, and I am a conviction-driven consultant, whether that's the economics I do, or the political advocacy, or the political campaigning from time to time. So I was in the States for about 3 years, and I did campaign school, candidate school, comprehensive fundraising training. And the thing I realized is they're about 10 years ahead of where we are domestically. And that campaign skill set, it doesn't exist domestically, or if it does, it's very tightly held within the Liberal Party, National Party, Labour Party headquarters. And because of that, there's not a lot of competition. So these people, they're not very good at what they do, and it's very easy to outperform them. So your viewers might have noticed last weekend that the Libertarians had a lot of success at the local council elections in New South Wales. And part of that would have been the fact that I sat down and trained some of these guys early this year. Spent 2 days intensive program with legal support and support from some consultants in the States, are friends of mine. And we went through a soup to nuts of how to run a campaign, how to fundraise, how to not get caught up in defamation actions or Human Rights Commission investigations. And these guys had 6 months worth of runway into the council elections last weekend. And the people who went through that program and ran, they're on track for an 80% win rate. And these people who are running in seats that they've never run before, seats where the Liberals typically don't run, so some of these rural seats. So they weren't necessarily beneficiaries of the fact that the Liberal Party didn't have their act together in council nominations. They just went out, ran good campaigns. Some of these guys did really well. They got more than one spot on council, which is just remarkable. So it's not hard. You get the basics right, and this is what the major parties seem to struggle with. They don't actually know how to run a proper campaign, and it's very easy to outcompete them because of that. The only difficulty domestically is finding the candidates and the modicum of resources to deploy behind them. But once you do that, it seems to be relatively straightforward.
Yeah, the New South Wales Liberal Party, absolutely extraordinary that they failed to get the paperwork in for 140 candidates for local government elections? Has there been as big a stuff up by a major party than that? I mean, how does that even happen? That oops, the deadlines, we forgot to lodge all these forms. How does that actually happen? And they've got the millions of dollars, the professional, like the full-time, supposedly professional people in HQ.
Yeah, well, just arrogance and incompetence. So how does something like that happen? There would have been a deliberate choice to leave this to the last minute, and part of that would have been about controlling who gets nominated and who doesn't, and that's all about Don Harwin. What's the name of the guy? Shields? Was it David Shields? I forget his name. These people are pretty.
I'll look it up.
I don't think it matters, but it's just that would have been the mindset that they want to control it, and they can't actually execute on filling out basic paperwork. So one of my guys, yeah, that's it. So one of my guys put in his paperwork, said it took him all of maybe 1 or 2 hours. So it's not hard. They just really fucked up, and they fucked up because of arrogance combined with incompetence. So if it delivers the Labor Party a huge free kick when they want to campaign against the Liberals. I mean, if you can't put in basic paperwork, if you can't manage yourself, how are you going to manage the country? And that's not even starting with this guy who's been accused of raping a kid as well. And the fact that
Rory Amon, the second ex New South Wales Liberal MP to be charged with rape. There's
child sex offences. Gareth Ward, right?
Yeah, who amazingly got re-elected. Yeah, as an independent.
You get to a point where you're the Liberal Party and you're facing off against a candidate who's facing sex charges like Gareth Ward did. And did they not mention it during the campaign? I mean, I would have thought that would be.
And they also stuffed around with getting a candidate as well.
Yeah, apparently they do that. I don't understand the mentality behind that. People playing games within the New South Wales Liberal Party executive, and look, I don't have good insight into the Liberal Party because I haven't been a member for a very long time, and I have no desire to be a member until the party.
I'm just asking, you're the expert here. I'm just trying to sort of make sense.
I'm just a guy. It doesn't make any sense to me. I can't understand it. It's just weird. It's just fucked up. I have no idea what these people were thinking. And if you're running against Gareth Ward and you're the Liberal candidate and he's been accused of sex offences, you'd kind of mention that in the campaign, and obviously they didn't. And that's just how bad Australian campaign expertise is. And maybe they were concerned about defamation. But if you're concerned about defamation, you can frame that appropriately. You can say, look, he's been accused. You don't have to say he fucked a kid or touched up a boy because nothing's been proved yet. But he has got to a point with the legal system that the police have had reason to believe he deserves to be charged with. I forget the exact nature of the offence. I think it was something in relation to a 17-year-old boy at this point.
And a 27-year-old man.
Yeah, and it's not the first charge that's come against him either. So it boggles my mind. It speaks to the fact that I don't know, if you're the Liberal Party headquarters and maybe you've got skeletons in your own closet, you don't want to campaign against someone who's been accused of these sort of things. I'm just speculating here, but it just makes no sense to me that if you're a Liberal Party candidate in Kiama and you're running against Gareth Ward and you don't mention this stuff, that's just weird. That is just gross incompetence as well.
Or maybe if they'd selected a local candidate like a year before the state election, rather than have it as a last minute thing, then maybe they would have been able to have a proper campaign.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the other thing. If your candidate isn't sort of out in the community 6 to 12 months in advance of the actual election day, are you really serious about trying to win that seat? Because that's sort of minimum time frame you'd need to sort of establish a profile in the community and introduce yourself to the key community groups in your electorate. So maybe it just speaks to the fact they weren't serious about having a proper tilt at that particular seat, and that in and of itself is a function of, I don't know, laziness, I guess.
So that's the New South Wales Liberal Party. Down where I live, the Victorian Liberal Party. Well, I'm not sure if you've tuned into any of
Not for a
Deeming
while.
Prosciutto, but it's not just a defamation case. A lot of people are looking at it as a de facto battle for what the Victorian Liberal Party stands for, because John Prosciutto, of course, massively freaked out when the National Socialist Network turned up at that Let Women Speak. And so his justification was, I want the Liberal Party to be inclusive, and this is why I need to expel
Yeah.
Moira Deeming.
Well,
So
I think it's as simple as he would have been freaked out by the potential press reaction. So
yes, that's what he says about in the not so secret recording now that's been published on the federal court
and
website.
and just because someone has a physical proximity to someone else at a protest,
I was there that day, so I saw everything that happened.
yeah. Uh, so what? You're always going to have weirdos turn up to protests, and just because someone's at the same protest at the same time doesn't necessarily mean that Moira Deeming approved of their presence or what they had
No,
to say. So Pizzuto's just completely shit the bed. He's panicked because he's so freaked out about Nazis, and I don't even know that there are any serious Nazis in this country, or if there are, I certainly
well,
haven't
the
met.
National Socialist Network are the most prominent group, and they do these
But
sorts of
they're kind of
up.
ass clowns, aren't they? They can barely organize themselves. They waltz around in mass. Do they have any resources? Do they have any weaponry? Have they actually done anything? They just turn up at protests. I don't know why they're taken seriously, not because they are serious, but because they're kind of a right wing boogeyman that the left like to flag and smear all conservatives with. So I don't know that there are any real Nazis in this country. If they were, and if they're serious, they'd be out shooting people. They wouldn't be fucking around at dipshit protests with more redeeming. That's for sure. If you're a real Nazi, it wouldn't take too long to, I don't know, do whatever you do, get some weapons training, figure out who's important politically, and put a
Well,
bullet in.
you shouldn't obviously. That's not good instructions to give.
No, but it's the fact that no one's doing that. There are no Nazis in this country. It's a complete
Well,
fantasy.
because that would be terrorism, and they'd be doing life in
Yeah,
prison for that.
there's not even that much terrorism in this country, so it
Oh
wouldn't be too
no,
late.
ASIO, of course. Because of a combination of the National Socialist Network, the rise in the pro-Palestine protests after October 7, lobbying from the Jewish Zionist Israeli lobby that there needs to be crackdowns. The ASIO Director General Mike Burgess, of course, he can easily get lobby for more funding and resources, and he certainly seems to be loving the limelight. So it took Sarah Ferguson, ABC 730, to the ASIO Museum, which is apparently secret as well.
But I just found it. I think I was listening into some of the testimony before one of the Senate committees. I just found it weird that ASIO spends the vast majority of it, or a majority of its time, I think it's like 70%, looking at domestic terrorism. And from what I can tell, yeah, when was the last uh, domestic terrorist action undertaken by nationalists. It hasn't happened outside of Christchurch in New Zealand.
There's been a few close calls with that teenager who was planning to assassinate the Labor member for Newcastle. I can't remember his name. Hung around at the office, and then they decided he didn't want to do it and just got arrested. They always talk about this lone wolf. That's what is. It's not so much.
I think it's lone wolf stuff. It's a concoction of academics and the bureaucrats have picked up on it, and it's part of their empire building. It's part of their staying relevance, but it's also politically, it's very attractive to the left to flag these things. They essentially aren't real, or just
but the liberal and national parties, they get also jump on board with this because obviously they in a post October 7 world, they want to be the protector of the Jewish, Israeli, Zionist community. And so Peter Dutton, maybe it's the Queensland cop in him as well, has been lobbying for stronger hate speech laws. I mean, gone are the days.
Look, I think it's simpler than that. I think it's the Murdoch press. The Murdoch press just they want him to take a certain line on these issues, and if I know one thing about politicians, they'll do whatever the press tell them to do. It's just a question of which press and who's telling them to do what. So there seems to be no sense of having a rational conversation about any of this. It's just, this is what the press is demanding, and they will genuflect to whatever the demands of the editors at the Australian, Sky News, The Age, Sydney Morning Herald, AFR.
Yeah, so someone described Sky News to me as basically a synagogue these days. I mean, you have Sharry Markson on at 8 p.m. in the Zio hour, and it's just all about the Israel-Gaza war, the national security threat. She does get some other stuff.
I just can't watch any of it because it's so boring. And Sharry Markson she's a high school graduate who I think her old man got her that job. She's basically a nepo baby, and she's not very good at what she does. She really struggles on television. So it's just it's embarrassing for her and anyone who watches it. I just can't anymore. It's so boring and unpredictable. It's not just Sharry Markson. There's very little insight on any of those television programs.
It's all scripted these days, Sky News, particularly Outsiders, because, well, it was after Ross Cameron got fired for supposedly his racist rant where he does this freelancing poetry, talked about Shanghai Disney World, about yellow-skinned, spiky-haired, slanty-eyed people going into Disney lands.
Look, that may have been an unfortunate set of words for him to have used, but it's not a fucking hanging offense as far as I'm concerned. And
he got the sack from Sky News, and also another turning point for Sky News is when Adam Giles, the former chief minister of the Northern Territory, had Blair Cottrell on, and then there was targeting the advertisers, and Jacinta Allen, who was the Victorian infrastructure minister at the time. It's like, I'm dragging Sky News off all the train stations. It's not going to be on anything. That was sort of when Sky News was like, we're just going to be very heavily scripted so nothing can go wrong, like those things.
Andrew Bolt cancelled Mark Latham after he had his issue with Alex Greenwich, which he was subsequently sued for.
He's also slagged off at Katie Hopkins, and most recently Candace Owens called her a sick woman.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of fed up with Andrew Bolt. He's boring, he's pompous, sanctimonious, and he cancels conservatives. Anyone who
Yeah,
cancels a
and
conservative.
this is one of the biggest problems with, the right side of politics. The left, it's solidarity forever. I mean, look at like the Greens, for example. They won't disavow any pro-Palestine activist, radical, any of them.
Well, I think it's less solidarity as it's more gatekeeping. So people like Andrew Bolt, they don't, and Sherry Markson, they don't want certain opinions in the domestic political landscape, and those opinions predominantly are populist, nationalist, libertarian, and deeply conservative. They don't want those values on television, and they gatekeep and they disavow anyone who expresses them, and they cancel anyone who transgresses against sort of the neoliberal establishment, because those are their paymasters. That's what Rupert Murdoch stands for.
And I think that, I definitely know that Craig Kelly has been cancelled. But I think he was on Sky once when he left One Nation on Chris Kenny's program, but he used to be nearly on every day, but not anymore. Same with John Ruddock. He was a regular there. They both appear on, and so does Mark Latham on ADH TV, which was originally Alan Jones was the main host there. After he was cancelled by Sky News because he got them a strike on their YouTube channel for vaccine misinformation, and so he had to go. Chris Smith, he was fired from Sky News for being drunk at the Christmas party.
Who would
He's
ever be drunk at a Christmas party? That never happens.
yeah, but he has a history of being inappropriate with women when he's drunk at Christmas
Yeah.
parties. So
Well, I understand he's
he
actually he's turned a corner, and I think he's been sober for a while now. So
yes, and he's now the main host on ADH TV, and it's interesting to notice just how now that he's not with a mainstream network, how different he is. And he platformed Candace Owens after Andrew Bolt called her a sick woman, and was sharing, there is this in Australia, you do get cancelled if you criticize Israel. And he was actually being quite candid, where you never would have heard that Chris Smith on Sky News or 2GB.
yeah, well, I think the last thing I heard about Chris Smith, yeah, some leftists was still they were still sledging him for being fired from Sky News, and because that's sort of nasty pricks they are. They're just really, really unpleasant people. I'm currently in the process of suing Dee Madigan for defamation, and she doesn't like it one bit, because finally someone's holding her accountable. And there's something deeply wrong with the way she conducts herself. And I think
Well,
it's
I don't know. Like, I saw the back and forth when you were on Twitter X between you two, but I remember she was also one of the regular lefties on, particularly Paul Murray, praising her campaigning, advertising skills. She's seen as one of these political geniuses behind Labor campaigns.
well, if she's a political genius, why was I able to register her domain name for $20? That's the sort of political genius we're dealing with. So if you go to www.dmadigan.com, it's basically me and my pathetic attempts with WordPress to throw up a website. And because it's a global domain, it'll start to rank. So she fucking hates it. She just because it's gonna start ranking,
Oh yeah,
and
here it is here. I don't give a fuck what you think. or
This
the
is just who she is. Nasty, unpleasant person. She looks like something from Planet of the Apes.
oh, that'll get you cancelled as well. You can't
Look, I'm already cancelled. You can't piss
you
me
can't
off.
say any human looks like an ape these days.
Well, she did it to herself. I don't know what she's done to herself, but there's obviously a deep insecurity there. Because Steve Madigan, she's a little fat kid with freckles. She posted one of her passport photos, and then it all made sense. This is someone who was deeply unpopular at school, huge insecurities, and
I don't want to get too personal in
oh,
that
look,
regard.
it's hard not to, because I'm just trying to figure out what motivates someone like this, and it's a level of it's a type of psychology I've just never really come across before. So I find it quite curious.
Yeah, so, warning: CFMEU aligned political campaigner.
The thing with Steve Madigan is she doesn't have a real business. She's just a trade union grifter. For the most part, her clients are either trade unions or ALP government entities that gift her contracts. So there's no commercial legitimacy to her. It's
that I thought when you describe trade union grifter, that could also describe Van Badham, who just gives she portrays herself as basically a communist, but shills for the Labour Party over the Greens.
Well, I barely know who Van Badham is because I try not to read The Guardian and I try not to consume domestic media. But yeah, look, it doesn't surprise me. She's all these journalists, they have paymasters. They know what they need to say in order to secure their employment. So the truth is secondary to these people. They're just speaking power to truth. That's all they do these days because they're so unemployable if they lose their current positions. It's just it's a complete mockery of what the profession may have been 50 to 100 years ago.
The political machine people are definitely in demand is the pollsters. We're getting, well, particularly in the US, we're getting so many polls at the moment, and as we're speaking, we just had a news poll drop, so I might just look that up if you don't mind. We'll break some news. So we have got it is ALP 31% primary, LNP 38, Greens 13, One Nation 6. The two-party preferred is still 50-50. Preferred PM Albanese is 46 to Dutton's 37. For Dutton, approve 37, disapprove 52. For Albanese, approve 43, disapprove 51. So first I'll ask you, what do you make of polls and, well, the recent batch of polls?
I don't think I make too much of them at all. I mean, they're sort of broadly interesting. They're expensive, but they're not focused on the marginal seats that matter. So averages across the country. Yeah. So One Nation maybe at 6%, but is that 6% in across the country or because they're a lot higher than that in Queensland?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's interesting to track these things over time, and obviously the politicians. It's the key barometer of how they're tracking. I suppose no one really knows what they're what's driving the poll up or down. There's a lot of commentary around maybe it's interest rates, maybe it's the economy, maybe it's cost of living, maybe it's XYZ. Contemporary political issues that came up in the last month since the last poll. It's all bullshit because no one actually provides any sort of rigorous analysis of this stuff. It's just loose commentary by a whole bunch of people who wouldn't have the analytical skill set to know how to track a poll properly and pull it apart in terms of its fundamental drivers. So I haven't seen it.
They have focus groups as well. What is that? Two of the sort of the ones that you hear from most, and that's Redbridge, which is Kosamaris, ex-Labor, a assistant state secretary in Victoria, and Tony Barry from the Liberals. Who was he a state director or assistant state director? But there's a lot of these. Well, that's a polling firm, but isn't there another sort of bipartisan polling consulting firm? It's got David Gazzard, who used to he was in Scott Morrison's inner circle, and Ben Oquist, who was at the Australia Institute and is married to Sarah Hanson Young.
Yeah, well, let's start with David Gazzard, because I think I know a bit about his background. Basically a journalist, come political staffer, and simply because he's rusted on to the conservative political establishment, apparently that gives him some sort of insight into how to run polling. I don't think so. It just gives him an inside running on lucrative lobbying contracts, which is basically how he makes an extraordinary amount of money. So I don't know the ins and outs of his exact business dealings, but he's sort of person will be paid $50,000 per month on retainer by Telstra to get them the results they want. That's sort of ecosystem.
Scott Morrison's former principal private secretary, Joran Finkelstein's also doing polls now, I saw.
Yeah, well, what's Kos's background? How do you spell his last name?
Samaras. So he's most well-known Kos in Australia.
Yeah, I put money on the fact he hasn't got a basic quantitative skill set. So it's just.
Well, he was one of those who was saying that after the Liberals lost the 2022 election, the Liberal Party was basically doomed. They were especially doomed because Peter Dutton decided not to support the Voice, and they say this after every time that the Labor Party wins federally, that Australia's in a centre left new paradigm. I mean, Albanese even sort of copied Rudd with his own summit, that job summit, which sucked in all of those business groups.
Oh yeah, you basically get used by proppers, the Labor Party, to pretend like they're actually having a real conversation with.
Yeah, that was hilarious how they were just all used.
So Kos Samaras, I guarantee you, is it's got no real political insight. It's just someone who's rusted onto the Labor Party, and that's how he makes his living, by providing them with sort of polling that has maybe some level of insight, but for the most part, it's just talking their book. So, well, the notion that what did he say about the referendum? The
Liberal Party had doomed itself by going. Well, I'm paraphrasing here. Doomed itself by going against the Voice. This was when the Voice was polling at like 60-40.
How's that look in retrospect? Like he's a complete ass clown, and
he has a lot of it goes through stages of copiism when he is proclamations. The other thing is that the immigration issue isn't that a big deal. It's just
right. Yeah, this is what's wrong with our political class. They live in a bubble, and they're told to think these things, and they're told to say these things, and whether or not they're true is completely secondary to these people. So essentially, what's driving the housing crisis at the moment in terms of house prices and rents? The overwhelming driver of that is immigration. I wrote a piece on Substack.
Yeah, I've got it here. It's so. Did you actually use Chat GPT to use? So, for those who don't know, Peter Chulip at the Centre for Independent Studies,
they're not really independent studies. It's just the Centre for Studies or the Center for Corporate Studies. They're a corporate shop right now. They're completely.
I used to be a member 10 years ago when they were, pretty based. They've gone the sort of a different direction than the Institute of Public Affairs, which is sort of much more grounded in housing and immigration than the CIS, and he's assisted by this American import, Emily Dye, who, well, self-interest, because she migrated here. She's, of course, it's infinite benefit immigration, and there's the other economist, Stephen Hamilton, who says that it's infinite, the benefit of mass immigration. I mean, he was the economist, Stephen Hamilton, who said we needed to shut down the economy because of COVID to save the economy.
These really are the spokespeople of the neoliberal elite. And what I've done there with ChatGPT, because Peter Tulip's a smart guy. He's got a PhD from Pennsylvania University, had a long career at the Reserve Bank, and he actually wrote one of the seminal papers on house prices. So he knows what drives housing demand. So all I did here was tell ChatGPT to take Peter Tulip's model and do a thought experiment and say, analyze the effect on housing prices of immigration and population growth using Peter Tulip's model, and go back 25 years and pretend like we'd set net overseas migration to zero at that point in time, and where would house prices be now if we'd done that? And you've got the answer there in front of you. If population growth halved due to zero migration, house prices would have grown by 25 to 40% less than they actually did. So immigration has a huge impact on house prices. Peter Tulip knows that. Emily Dye probably doesn't, because she's not a very good economist. She's only got an undergrad degree, but she should. But even to the extent that they know that, they can't speak the truth about this issue, because they'd be fired the next day. Then there's this taboo around discussing immigration in the corporate sector in Australia, in any sort of business advocacy environment. And look, I was part of that, and I wasn't necessarily pro-immigration, but I knew I couldn't express my own personal opinions in my professional capacity, nor express my own personal opinions in my personal capacity either. But now that I'm out of that ecosystem, I can just say whatever the fuck I want and point out that it really is the key driver of housing unaffordability. And I put this prompt into ChatGPT just to see how good this artificial intelligence was, and it kind of blew me away with the response it gave, because there's no censorship with ChatGPT. I mean, they have protocols around offensive stereotypes and nudity. But ChatGPT won't write a pornographic movie with people sledging each other using hate speech, but it can go away and do something. It can go away and do something reasonably analytical and straightforward, and give you an honest answer in the sort of way someone who is completely autistic would. So they'll say something fundamentally true that's incredibly awkward socially, and that's what I love about it. And look, I'm not autistic myself. I just happen to be incredibly uncompromising when it comes to the truth. So I actually find it quite refreshing when I do have conversations with people who are autistic, because it's just so much fucking easier. So ChatGPT here, I've just said, look, go away, use Peter Tulip's own model, find out what sort of impact immigration has had on house prices over the last 25 years. And it's huge. It's the fundamental driver, and it's the one thing you can change overnight. You can't change zoning laws. You can't change housing supply easily, but you can change net overseas migration at the flip of a switch almost.
But what is missing from this, on just saying what they would probably say, is that you need migrants to build the houses. This is what
that's bullshit. That's bullshit. How many of the migrants that come in are in the construction industry. I mean, we have a domestic construction industry already. So I mean they say that, but it's a really cheap line and one that's really unsophisticated, and they can only run it because no one will push back. No one will actually critique that and say it's bullshit and show me the data. And no one does because they're all terrified of losing their jobs. I'm not terrified of losing my job anymore because I've already lost it. I don't give a fucking shit anymore. They go fuck themselves. And I think I said that in the last line of that piece. They got some $10,000 a piece event happening on the Gold Coast, and I'm tempted to buy a ticket just to go up there and tell them, do you really think we're that fucking stupid? And that's just where I am at the moment. I'm completely fed up with these people. It's not just them, it's the entire political class, it's the journalists. These are really toxic, low rent individuals. They're in a class of people that will just say anything for money. And to me, that's just abhorrent. It just it's despicable.
The consensus that has emerged, is emerging amongst political leaders of both parties, is that we need to build up in our cities, particularly the inner suburbs, and literally bulldoze the NIMBYs, the old houses there, and put up medium high density, which is, and we'll probably get into how mass migration is changing Australia in more ways than one. Australia, because it is such a large country, it's always been suburban home, a 3-4 bedroom backyard. But are they aiming for families to basically live like they do in Hong Kong or Shanghai or New York?
Yeah, they are. They're saying you have to have a lower standard of living. You have to compromise on wanting to live in a house with a backyard because they want a big Australia. And why do they want a big Australia? They're not exactly clear on why they want a big Australia. They just want one. They just want an extra 1% population growth a year, just so markets domestically can be 1% bigger a year. Why? It's pathetic. It really is. It really is quite thinly rooted in terms of the economic argument for it. So they want to grow domestic markets because these people who fund the CIS, the Sydney corporate establishment, are so fucking pathetic. They cannot establish beachheads overseas and grow in foreign markets. Every time they've tried, they've fucked it up. So NAB in North America. And so they want the domestic economy to grow by an additional 1% per year. Who cares? If they want larger markets, they've got the whole world to choose from. Australia's, what is it? It's the 12th largest economy in the world. But it'd be 98% of the rest of the GDP on the planet takes place in the rest of the world. And a lot of that's contestable. And the fact they can't manage it is an indictment on just how bad these people are. They can't run their own companies well. They're gifted these jobs for the most part. They're incredibly cosseted. They're bullied into whatever the latest opinion is by that's dictated to them by media owners, and they basically don't care because they've got no skin in the game. They're paid large 6- and 7-figure salaries to sit in these positions, and they, to a large extent, they don't actually care what happens to shareholders. So that's basically where those people come from. They've got no skin in the game. And the thing as an economist, I realize if someone's got no skin in the game, they can do and say anything, and that's what these people do.
Oh, well, they've got a skin in other things, certainly. Follow the money. That's
I think when it comes to immigration, it's largely driven by property developers. In terms of the political economy dynamics, property developers they're the real beneficiaries of this constant influx from overseas. It drives up housing and land prices. And I don't know how they donate, but I'm sure they donate quite heavily at the federal level. They can't at the state level. They can't at the local council level. So that'd be if I had a research budget, that'd be the first thing I look at. Try and figure out how these property developers, how these construction titans like Triggerboff are funneling money to both the Liberal and Labor Party to keep up this huge overseas migration program that's essentially crippling Australian young families and curtailing the existence of a whole generation of Australians through just cost of living pressures. It's
one of
it's,
my
it's
one of my followers, he normally goes by the name Paleoconservative Australian, obviously in this comment, the guy from Macroeconomics, Leith Van Onselen, who he does counter the Emily Dyes and Peter Tulips and Steve Hamilton's of
yeah.
the
I
world.
think the reason he does that though is it's because he's independent. He's actually a genuinely independent journalist. So he doesn't have paymasters. He has to
Well,
answer.
it's self-funded. Viewer support, reader supported macro business, and they're not fooling anyone. Thanks to people such as yourself and Leith Van Onselen, our leaders are not fooling us anymore when it comes to the GDP figures. I mean, we're still seeing grocery prices continue to go up. We know that we're getting poorer. Our standard of living in terms of, just our ability to get around and actually enjoy, like, just going out for a trip to the zoo or something. We have had 6 quarters of negative per capita. And yeah, it's not called a recession because of this, because it's counted as, well, how much has the economy actually grown? It's all being pumped full of, topped up with mass migration.
Yeah, look, that's a good insight. But also, I think we're genuinely we're not in a recession, because if we were in a recession, you'd see it in the unemployment rate, and the unemployment rate's still pretty well contained. Last time I checked, it was beneath 5%.
4.2%, but obviously that only includes the people who are looking for work.
True, there's a whole bunch of people on the margins, and youth unemployment always tends to be an issue. But in terms of the headline unemployment rate, which is a key for monetary policy, yeah, there's no indication from the labour market that we're in a recession at all. So we're certainly in a period in which living standards have declined, and part of that decline has been driven by cost of living pressures, and part of that has been driven by a net overseas migration program that really only serves the interests of property developers, and that no one really wants. And no one's really wanted this inflicted on us for decades now. It's You have a political establishment imposing this from the top down on behalf of wealthy people, and anyone who speaks out against it is targeted, vilified, smeared. They did this to Graham Campbell back in the 90s.
He
People remember
was,
Graham Campbell?
yeah, is the Australia First Party, Australians Against Further Immigration as
Yeah,
well, wasn't
actually, who's that guy from House, the Australian guy? He's he, I think Jesse Spencer. His parents
it?
actually
Yeah,
headed.
his father
Yeah,
was. I can't. Yeah, he's a Hollywood actor. I'll look up
because
his.
he's I think his father was the founder of that, or had some key role in that political party. So these aren't stupid people. These aren't your sort of the nut job extremists that they're portrayed to be by the press. These are actually,
Rodney Spencer.
yeah. And his brother's actually a doctor in real life, is my understanding. So these are smart people with intelligent opinions, and they've got good arguments. And they just haven't been widespread in terms of their distribution amongst the Australian polity. But yeah, there's generally good arguments there. Judith Sloan's been fantastic in the Australian, and she's someone I have a
And
lot of respect for.
yeah, she's always been pretty good, and she is extremely blunt.
Yeah, she's very forthright.
I've seen her at like when I used to go to these sorts of policy events. Like if there was something said that she didn't like, she would let them know.
Yeah, she's probably a nicer person than I am. Doesn't swear as much as I do, and she's got high level experience. But I think to some extent, she's probably 40 to 50% cancelled as well. So there's cancellation, and I think there are degrees of it. It's just that I'm at 100% level, and your average Liberal Party staffer is probably at 50%, and it's kind of a spectrum that if you say certain things, and depending on how egregious they are or whether you're forgiven or not, they just they hang over you forever, because that's just the way the left like to operate. There's no forgiveness, there's no process, there's no appeal mechanism. There's just the use of arbitrary political power by people who are just despicable on a moral level, at war with the truth, essentially.
Well, I've also had on Wilms front before. Well, probably the youngest political staffer to be cancelled, Barclay McGain. So much so that he hasn't been. Well, thankfully, the Australian Taxpayers Alliance still keep him as an associate. They were holding an event in Brisbane, and all the LNP politicians cancelled when they knew that he would be there, because they got the direction from HQ. You can't be at the same event that he's at,
Yeah,
because
yeah. That's kind of weak-willed, spineless individuals they are, and they think they're playing four-dimensional chess. They think they're being really clever and really strategic, and they're just being pathetic, revealing their true character. And we got an election in 5 weeks' time, and the only reason Christopher is going to win is because he's not the Labor Party. He's got no
yeah.
particular.
Oh yeah, he's little squirmy guy. He's just going to be Labour light. I nickname him Christopher He, and they're all for a decade. They've all been scared of the ghost of Campbell Newman. In fact, he himself called him the Voldemort of the Queensland LNP. He said that, not me, because I remember Tanya Plibersek got in trouble for saying Dutton looks like Voldemort. Digressing.
This is
Here,
Tanya Plibersek, who's married to a convicted heroin trafficker. This is that Tanya Plibersek, and despite being a convicted heroin trafficker, he was head of the Premier's Department in New South Wales. I mean, the Liberal Party gave a job to someone whose criminal conviction wouldn't allow him to work as a nurse or a teacher in the state. That's how corrupt our political class are, and that's how weak the Liberal Party are. No one in the Liberal Party pointed this out and objected, apparently, or if they did, they didn't do so publicly. This is someone who's got a serious criminal conviction for an offence that probably led to the deaths of his fellow Australians. And because he's on the left, because he's married to Tanya Plibersek, hey, all's forgiven, because we're the political class, and the rest of you can go fuck yourself, basically.
Yeah, he's reformed. That's the message.
Yeah, well, it doesn't change what he did, and doesn't change the fact that it's completely hypocritical. If anyone else had that offence against them, they wouldn't get a look in with any job anywhere, pretty much.
Well, that's certainly true.
Yeah, it's a two-tiered economy. If you're Kate Carnell and you kill a kid, if you're this guy, I forget his name, and you're a convicted heroin trafficker, yeah, the rules don't apply to you. You can get these large six-figure salaries, sucking dick off the political class, and doing what your paymasters tell you. The rules don't apply to you. The press fawns over you, and the other people who take a crack at you from time to time kind of dissident shitlords like myself who just don't care anymore.
Now the Queensland, because well, it's actually not the next. Well, it's the next state election. There's also the ACT election on October 19th, but everyone sort of forgets about that one. Yeah, it's so Queensland has a unicameral parliament, 93 seats, a electorates for a preferential voting. So there's the only crossbench there's going to be is the Catters, and they get 3 seats in North Queensland. But One Nation's they sacked their only MP in Queensland. This is on top of Craig Kelly quitting, and also Mark Latham leaving. Was it the end of last year? And Craig Kelly was pretty honest. Said, like, look, I tried to sort of make it so that the party was more open. That was not going to happen with Pauline Hanson and James Ashby.
Well, I think One Nation's it's just capped out in terms of its potential, and it's capped out because of essentially James Ashby, and it's Pauline Hanson who keeps him in that role. So Ashby, unfortunately, is someone who I don't know what his issue is, but he finds it difficult to form coalitions and work with other people. And that's what politics is all about. So you're at a point where the party just runs off Pauline Hanson's brand, how much longer she's going to last in terms of her time in politics, given her age. She's got a really good sense of retail politics. I'm actually 5 minutes away from the fish and chip shop at the moment. If I hopped in the car, I could be there in under 10 minutes. So I live here. I know what these people are like. I know what they think, and they're good people. They're solid, middle working class, and they just don't do political correctness because they don't have on one level the sophistication for it to tie yourself in knots intellectually to say one thing while knowing something else to be true. And they're just good, decent, honest people. And it reminds me of the country I grew up in about 30 odd years ago. Whereas Canberra and Sydney and Melbourne is just pretty wild in terms of their departure from what you might call norms of human behavior.
We also we have the federal election, and I reckon it'll probably be in May because the calendar's quite congested. There's the West Australian state election on March the 8th, and we've talked about One Nation and the Libertarians. There's been a history of a fractured right. United Australia Party are not going to be in this federal election because they're deregistered. Jared Rennick, his People First Party, it's basically just so he can get above the line. It's not a real party. But obviously you advised the Libertarian Party and once ran for them. It seems to me that I think they're going to emerge as the and John Roddick's already talked about this. We're going to be the little brother to the Liberal Party, like the Greens are to Labor. And I was in its predecessor, the Liberal Democrats, and they've sort of already had their internal civil war, and the based Libertarians definitely won. Because when I was in the party, there were those who were saying that we should embrace social justice, feminism, transgenderism, but that's John Roddick and David Limbrick certainly take an anti-woke agenda. And especially in this post-COVID world, there's so much distrust of the government that libertarians are able to harness. And, well, they took your advice. They're the most organized at present.
Yeah, look, I don't want to claim full responsibility for the result on last weekend, but it did have an impact, and a lot of it does come down to the fact that these people did actually go away and put in the effort in terms of running decent campaigns, organizing volunteers, organizing fundraising, running their own social media. So when it comes to libertarians, particularly in the States, they tend to be very, very leftist these days. So they're very woke, particularly at the Cato Institute.
There was a reclaiming of the Libertarian Party by led by Dave Smith, that libertarian podcaster, and the Mises
Yeah,
caucus.
he's quite good. Yeah,
Yeah, but that
I
didn't
quite
stop Chase Oliver getting the nomination, who's a left
well,
libertarian.
look, that'd be a reflection of who's got the money behind them. So it's the open borders globalists, which tend to lean heavily libertarian. They think they're smarter than everyone else. They think national borders are an irrelevance. You can just replace the population of Western countries with the third world and not end up with living in a shithole. And it's just not true. It's not empirically accurate. It's inconsistent with the literature I looked at when I was at Johns Hopkins University doing postgrad economics. So the thing about immigration that people really need to take on board is fundamentally the reason why rich countries are rich and poor countries are poor is because rich countries have high quality institutions of government and poor countries have poor quality institutions of government. So that's kind of where the consensus is in terms of the economics profession. But the next obvious question is, well, where do these institutions come from? And the debate there hasn't really been advanced very much. And it's obvious to me as someone who reads outside of the economics literature, as someone who's read Samuel Huntington, and someone who's informed
I've got the
about
book on my bookshelf, Samuel P. Huntingdale, Clash of Civilizations. It predicted the future, basically.
pretty much, yeah. What sort of model of geopolitics actually has predictive power? So it's an incredible book. It gives you a real insight into the real world and the conflicts that are going on at the moment, and a sort of deep insight into why they're happening and what's driving them. And so, going back to my point on institutional economics, the issue is where do these high quality institutions of government come from? And the economics profession hasn't really landed on an answer yet. And the answer to me is obvious. They're rooted in the culture of a country and the political culture of that country, which ultimately stems out of it has a religious inheritance behind it, and the morality that animates a lot of secular Western liberals is essentially it's post-Christian, but it has the same Christian morality within it of do unto others as you would do unto them, which outside of the West is something you don't actually find that much. We live in law-built heavens that are essentially a function of people with a highly internalized morality, and they behave well in it, and they're deregulated. So, well, that's a crude way to describe human behavior, but they act, they do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and they know that on an individual level. And when you've got a society composed of those individuals, you don't need that much law and order. But when you've got a society composed of people who will just do whatever they can get away with because it suits them, then you're kind of living in squalor in India, Africa, wherever. And that's just one aspect uh, of, and it's quite a crude. It's quite a crude description, but essentially it speaks to a fundamental truth. And you can be more sophisticated in your analysis, and I encourage anyone who's got an interest to have a look at that literature. There's a great long essay by a professor at George Mason University. It looks at it asks the question: do immigrants import their economic destiny? So if we import the third world and they replace us, Do we still have high quality institutions of government and a first world living standard? And my answer would be chances of that happening pretty fucking remote. Just look at what's happened to Albania. I mean, it used to be a completely different country. Now it's majority Muslim and incredibly poor.
Going back to we mentioned the Samuel P. Huntingdale's A Class of Civilizations. Another thing it predicted is that mass migrants to the West, they come here because of the economic opportunity. They enjoy all of the perks of our culture, but they still keep their own culture, and still there's this contradiction. They resent a lot of our culture as well, and that's that's being reflected in a number of mass migration groups. I mean, have you seen some of these protests outside the Home Affairs office? They're attacking Australia, yet they want to stay here.
Yeah, it's really despicable conduct. I mean, Australia's been quite welcoming towards these people. We've afforded them equal rights, and they turn around and attack our fundamental values and our way of life. It's certainly unacceptable from a nationalist perspective, and as someone who actually thinks that. And look, a lot of immigrants do actually appreciate this country for what it stands for, and that's why they come here. But to have groups within the society, even amongst fellow Australians who don't actually like the country and want to tear it apart, that's what we're trying to stop. These are the people that need to be pushed back on. They need to have their opinions critiqued. They need to be made to fight for every inch of ground they want to take, because Javier Milei was right. These shit leftists, give them an inch and they'll take a mile, and before you know it, you're cutting the genitals off children and giving them puberty blockers at the age of 13 and 14, and you think, well, how the fuck did we get here? How did this happen so quickly? And I can tell you, it's usually a function of just complete and utter indifference. And most people, if they do find these issues, if they do come across them, they just they'll put their head down to stay safe. They'll put their head down because it's not their issue. Yeah, why bother? Why make yourself a martyr? Because typically the people who do object to this any sort of extreme activity like drag queen story time, they get mobbed by these extremists on the left, and in the case of Wilson Gavin, bullied into suicide at the age of 21. I mean, this guy was just a kid. And
yeah, I just was completely shocked by that. I actually interviewed him on the old podcast I used to do. Is very young, articulate man, and yeah, I still can't believe it.
the terrible thing about the left is they're completely unapologetic to it.
Well, they did try to wash their bloody hands after that. They're sort of like, oh, like Gavin was still part of our community, even though like he was protesting drag queen stories. I'm like,
yeah, well, that's damage control by people who are just fundamentally despicable. I can tell you from first-hand experience. D. Madigan thinks it's funny. Docs. D. Madigan thinks it's what did she say? That I lost my job. I was fired for being a fuckwit online, which is completely inaccurate and defamatory, which is why I'm suing her. No, I wasn't fired, and I certainly wasn't fired for being a fuckwit online. I was doxxed. Over $38 billion in subsidies that her and her fucking union mates at the super funds love because it supports these uneconomic wind and solar farms. So that's sort of people you're dealing with. They think the politics of personal destruction is completely legitimate. They will say or do anything to win. They will say or do anything to get someone fired. and that's just how they play politics. That's the price of doing business for them. They have very little moral scruples, and unfortunately, people like that just have to be dealt with. So that's why I made the decision to commence this legal action against D. Madigan. And my only constraint is, I'd much rather be chasing paedophiles out of New South Wales Parliament than dealing with this screeching harpy from the trade union movement.
Well, New South Wales Parliament seems to be giving the BBC a run for its money with the paedophiles being exposed.
Yeah, well, the thing about
alleged paedophiles, I should say.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about the Liberal Party these days is it's full of careerists who don't actually believe anything. All they really believe in is having a seat in Parliament, and beyond that, trying to affect any sort of change or standing for something. That seems to be a second or third tier consideration for them. So the very transactional people, they'll say or do anything to advance their careers, and usually that just means bending the knee to whatever media narrative is prevailing at a particular point in time. And the media narrative may be, oh, we need to lock down the economy because there's a pandemic, or it may be that Bettina Arndt needs to be cancelled because she made a comment people believe are unacceptable. So
yeah, she's been cancelled a number of times now.
Yeah, she's actually a really nice person. She's thoughtful and
I've had her on a number of times.
She's willing to consider arguments that any normal person would consider, and that's the left don't like that. You're not allowed to think certain things. Even thinking about certain things is forbidden. Even noticing certain things as well, and they'll try and get you cancelled for any of that.
Well, if you look at the one courageous idea that the Liberals and Nationals have going into the next election, nuclear power, and you've had, obviously there was supposedly the independent CSIRO saying it's uneconomical, and then you had the Clean Energy Council, the Smart Energy Council. What's the difference between those two?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the difference between them is that the Clean Energy Council doxed me and the Smart Energy Council hasn't. So Mark Bretherton was the media manager at the Clean Energy Council, and he was the guy that doxed me. And look, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been published in the newspaper, because about 2 weeks after the incident, we found out who'd done it, because we had a look at the metadata and the attachments he sent to the press, because he'd actually used at the time a pseudonym. And this is one of the really sinister parts about what he did. The pseudonym he used was Matthew Murdoch, who has a history of taking out AVOs against conservative talk show hosts, so a bit of a nutter. So here I am thinking this nutcase Matthew Murdoch is going to turn up at reception at work and have a run at the receptionists. So actually you have to call the police and notify them. And it's not Matthew Murdoch at all. It's this fucking shitheel, Mark Bretherton, who despite being outed as the individual who did this, kept his job as the media manager at the Clean Energy Council, and appallingly is currently the media manager at Anglicare Victoria. So if anyone wants to do me a solid, just dial up the board at Anglicare Victoria, point them towards that article in the Australian where I point out that I was doxed by this guy, and use their whistleblower process to make a complaint against him.
Although that would probably be considered doxing now with the new anti-doxing law, which
do you have any thoughts on that? It's not at all. It's all this is public domain, and I just haven't got around to pursuing it because I don't know. Maybe I'm too close to it. Maybe I don't have perspective.
Oh no, I'm talking about as there's this new anti-doxing law. Which
in terms of what happened to me, yeah. Look, it's gotten so bad that they're making it illegal now. So I think it still is. Doxing someone is punishable by 3 years in jail under the current legislation. So Dee Madigan, being the fucking lunatic that she is, she doxed my personal information online about a week and a half ago. So I got to the point. I said, "Look, you realise what you've done?" And she just said. So I told her to take it down. She just said no and laughed at me. So I was forced to basically refer this matter to the police. I've got the reference number. I have no idea what's happened to it. It's been referred to local police. I'm sure they'll follow up with me once I've had a chat to her. But just absolutely despicable behaviour, and just someone who just will not comply, doesn't understand the legal system, and doesn't understand that she can be accountable for transgressing against that legal system. And this is someone who's so arrogant. She committed contempt of parliament in
Oh, yeah,
relation.
that was over the video of Jared Blay, his deputy LNP leader, tearing up a bit of paper. She published that, which you can't use parliamentary footage for like satire, ridicule.
Yeah, so she clearly thinks she's above the law, that no one can touch her.
Well, I
And
think she got lots of people defending her over that, and so she felt validated that, well, I'm in the right here, because even though it's contempt of parliament, we should be able to do things like that.
yeah, but I suppose the other thing she thinks is she can defame me. She also thinks she can dox me, and I strongly object on both counts, and I'm going to pursue the matter legally. So I'll keep you posted on what happens. She doesn't like the fact she's accountable. She doesn't like the fact I've sent her a concerns notice. If you look at her Twitter feed, she's seriously pissed off that I exist. She's pissed off that I registered her domain name. She's just a lunatic. I have no idea what motivates this individual, but I suspect it's just uh, deep insecurity. So she actually went on Q&A last Monday, and she was quite proud of it.
I can't stand to watch that program anymore. It's so it's even worse than it was 10 years ago. Just so unwatchable.
Yeah. Well, she went on Q&A and she said a $600 billion investment in nuclear energy would only provide 3.7% of Australia's generation needs. And it took me 10 seconds to check that with ChatGPT. Turns out she's wrong by orders of magnitude. That level of investment in nuclear power would more than cover the entire generation capacity of the economy. So she's just bizarre, and the fact she can be this wrong on so many issues and just keep getting invited onto these shows just shows how cosseted our political class are. They live in a different world with different standards for them and different standards for us. And yeah, I think people are right. People are picking up on the fact, and they're right to be pissed off about it. I mean, these aren't exceptional people. These aren't statesmen. These aren't people who are actually out curing cancer or delivering policy that improves our well-being. These are some of the worst people in the country. And Dee Madigan's a walking externality. Everything she says is basically wrong or grossly overstated, and it usually has one objective, and that is to get Labor governments in power so they can deliver privileges to their union mates.
Well, we're seeing over in the US presidential election, it's to the max degree just how if you repeat a lie enough and the media cover for you, like the amount of lies Kamala Harris told during the debate about January 6th, misrepresenting Trump's bloodbath comments, also about claiming that Trump called Nazis very fine people, and it's they didn't fact check any of it. Like, just the amount of it's so much more blatant. I guess they're more awake to it in the United States, the lies, as Australians at large aren't.
I don't know. I think I read a Deloitte Access Economic Consulting report recently on the contribution of the press and television to the Australian economy. And apparently, the key takeaway from that for me was your average Australian only consumes about 15 minutes of news media a week.
That's good.
It's good, but it basically means the entire country is on autopilot. They're not paying attention at all. And I think that 15 minutes across that the people who do consume media, it's highly concentrated. So I'd say 99.5% of the country just happily going about their lives, doing normal things, having normal lives, running businesses, raising kids, enjoying themselves.
Which is good, but it's also bad in a way, because it'll come election time, they still vote for the politicians who are screwing them over.
Yeah, which is why those politicians are incredibly vulnerable. So if you point out how exactly they've been screwing them over, and you can do that at low cost using social media, then all of a sudden people can find themselves out of parliament, and they don't like that very much. That's the one time these people are vulnerable and accountable is at elections. And I think the thing is just the absence of any sort of civic culture in this country. We don't have well-organized grassroots groups the way they'd have in the US.
No, because we are largely a welfare state. There's so much volunteerism over in the US. We've completely lost that here. I mean, there's basically only the CFA. That's about it.
Yeah, sort of life-saving clubs. It's all pretty.
Yeah.
None of it's particularly political or policy oriented. So we just don't have a very active civic or political culture. Australia is quite a sleepy jurisdiction, to be fair. Campaigning here is pretty low rent, low energy affair. Not a lot of money involved. If there's not public money involved, there's usually no money involved at all when it comes to public policy. So the entire political ecosystem runs off the electoral funding they get from the electoral office,
which is from the taxpayer.
Yeah, or it's the money they get in terms of their salaries as MPs or the salaries of their staffers. So the entire thing, it's highly contestable because of that. So if you can get a foothold into hit your quota in terms of your 4% to get the public funding, then the cost of the campaign you run can pay for itself. And you can use those monies to run again, increase the size of your political movement, organize. And I think once these parties on the right get their act together, once one of them breaks away as a leader with significant campaign capacity and the ability to fundraise properly and coherent policies, which is what the Libertarians have going for them. They take policy really seriously. It's actually a party of principle, and because of that, you can trust them to the extent that you align yourself with their values.
And John Ruddock got a good lesson from dealing with the New South Wales Liberal Party for many years about what not to do.
Yeah. Well, John's been a revelation to me just how good he's been in Parliament. It's the reason I ran in Bathurst was to help harvest votes for that upper house race. And I tell you what, you can't until you run, you just have no real insight into what it's like to actually manage a campaign. So the good experience for me, I learned an incredible amount throughout that period. It's a relatively short campaign, and the result reflects that, probably limited in terms of what I actually accomplished at that election. So you run for your second race is what they tell you in the States. The first time around is about finding out what you need to do in order to win the second time. Because the first time around, usually you make a whole bunch of mistakes. Have I still got you there? The video froze for a second.
Oh, yeah, it's dropped out there. We're back now.
Okay, good.
Oh, maybe that's a sign we should wrap it up. But we've had a really chat.
And thanks for having me on. It's good to know people like you
Yeah,
still
thanks
exist.
for. Yeah, well, I've heard you on the Backbench Drivers podcast on the National Observer. You're a straight talker, blunt talker, which is what we love here. And yeah, you've
Yeah, well,
already
the
been.
great thing about me is I'm outside of the political ecosystem now, so I'm not working for Kate Carnell or trade associations, so I can just say what I think. Don't have to be too concerned about career implications because there's no career in that space anymore. Not for me,
Yeah,
and I
and
wouldn't want to.
you don't care that, like I've interviewed like other controversial people, like you're not cared about, what is it, the old guilt by 6 degrees of association.
Oh, it's a free country, right? And I think that's what I said when I was doxxed. So this guy rang me, and I was kind of like, you fucking serious?" I'm thinking, "You fucking serious?" And I said back to him, "Well, it's either a free country or it's not." And turns out it's not. It's not in a very big way. And the Liberal Party view on this matter is freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences, but it kind of does. Because if you're living in a world where anything you say can cost you your entire livelihood, you're not going to say very much. And you're not really living in a free country at all. You're just living in a cancel culture, uh, neo Bolshevik society with market characteristics. And it's unpleasant, and people deserve to have the right to their privacy. People deserve to have the right to express their opinions. And employment law needs to look at this issue, and privacy law needs to be strengthened. And yes, I fully support the anti-doxing regime that's going to be coming in because it's despicable conduct, and it needs to be made criminal because what Mark Bretherton did uh, probably breached elements of the uh, criminal law in terms of use of an electronic carriage system to harass and intimidate someone. But did the police care? Not really.
Well, that's the other thing. Selective policing. When we've got our own version of two-tier curism here.
Yeah, it's anarcho tyranny, and it's real. So if you're white middle class, you're subject to all sorts of policing. But if you want to go burn down, break windows in Alice Springs, then doesn't seem to be a lot of discouragement at this point. Yeah. It's particularly bad in the States. Not as bad here, but Black Lives
We
Matter
are
is just
still pretty safe
still like,
by comparison. And yeah, we certainly want to
yeah.
keep it that way. Um,
Well, having lived in the States, I've seen how bad it is firsthand, and it really did feel like living in a dystopian near distant future. That's how I describe it, and it felt really oppressive. And if you've seen The Lives of Others, the film about the Stasi in East Germany during the Cold War, that's kind of how Washington D.C. felt. No one tells jokes. You can lose your position for talking out of too candidly the way I'm doing now, and that's not the America that a lot of people I met over there grew up with by any means.
uh, uh, but it's okay to get up to all sorts of seedy sex stuff when you think no one's looking.
Oh well, Hunter Biden's laptop is. I I found it quite amusing when Marjorie Taylor Greene was holding up pictures from the laptop in Congress and pointing out what an absolute piece of shit this guy is. So yeah, look, these people are compromised, and um, if they had no, they just have no standards at all. So it's arbitrary what they choose to crack down on, and the press are essentially just an instrument of power now, completely unethical, unscrupulous, quite happy to break the law, break any sort of ethical boundaries or strictures, and no one holds them accountable because they're the people who get the political class elected.
Well, my audience has very much enjoyed hearing from you. They've stuck around for the entirety of our chat, which is excellent. I encourage all of you to subscribe to Burchell's Substack. And yeah, thanks for coming on. And yeah, we'll definitely catch up again soon.
Yeah, I'm going to try and write more for Spectator and Quadrant, and if I can, reasonably active in terms of my public Facebook page, so check me out there. Other than that, sign up to Substack, or if you're in Brisbane, shoot me an email and we'll catch up for a bit.
All right, keep well, and yeah, we look forward to Wilson versus Madigan in the federal court in the future.
Yeah, it won't go that far, hopefully, but certainly it's going to ACAT in Canberra sometime soon. So if she had any sense, which she doesn't, she'd sort the matter out expeditiously, as I've invited her to do numerous times, and she won't. So we're just going to have to get a third party to rule on it, because her behaviour is despicable, absolutely unconscionable.
I'm sure you'll let us know how that goes. As we'll catch you later, and yeah, thanks again for coming on.
No, pleasure, and I'll see you at CPAC hopefully.
No, you won't see me at CPAC.
No, I understand the reasons for that. So
I'll be at the free speech rally in Melbourne. It's on the same day. That's where I'll be.
That sounds like it might be the better option if you're in Melbourne. So all the best with that.
Flagstaff Gardens. We'll see if Antifa show up to protest for censorship.
Yeah, I wonder if you could citizens arrest an Antifa person if they had a mask on. Probably best not to.
Yeah, I mean they've got possibly have weapons on them.
Oh well, you can definitely get in trouble for carrying a knife in the city, I'm sure. Worth having a chat to a lawyer about that. Anyway, I'll let you figure all that out on your own, and hopefully I'll chat again soon.
Yep, will do.
Take care, Tim.
Good night. All right, everybody, that is another Wilms Front interview show. So I'm glad that I've been able to bring you a couple in reasonably quick succession with some quite interesting guests. So definitely there will be more to come. So, of course, I will be back tomorrow night for Tim's News Explosion at the normal time, which is, of course, 9 p.m. on the Wilms Front channels, YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. So make sure that if you're watching now that you are subscribed, click the bell to allow for notifications, and also like all of Unshackled Productions. Leave a comment below, share, because it all helps. Now, of course, I'll be covering tomorrow night on Tim's News Explosion, summarizing we're into week 2 of Deeming versus Prosciutto in the Federal Court of Australia in Melbourne. The latest from two-tier Keir Britain, where the latest BBC pedophile, Hugh Edwards, has escaped prison receiving a suspended sentence, though over in the United States, Sean Diddy, or as I will call him, Diddler Combs, is behind bars on sex trafficking charges, but has been put on suicide watch at the same Metropolitan Detention Centre where Epstein suicided in 2019. Plus the latest from the US presidential election, where not even Oprah could save Kamala Harris from producing a fresh batch of word salads, while Trump's second assassination attempt at his own golf course has already been memory hold. So that is tomorrow night. And remember, I also alert my audience to all of the up-and-coming Unshackled productions. on the Unshackled's Substack, which is also a way for you to support so I can bring you more Unshackled productions. So monthly $5 per month, annual $50 per year, founding member $500 per year. So that's the home for Unshackled Productions, where I send out email alerts. Still using the unshackled.net for all of written articles. So I'll put the link into my internet's running low here. Oh, sorry, I put the link into the Substack here. And yeah, so the unshackled.net/membership. So there's bronze for $5 per month or $50 per year. Silver, $10 per month, $100 per year. A gold, $50 for $500 gold $25 per month for $250 per year, and platinum $50 per month for $500 per year. I'll put the link in there. And now there was no report from Tiger Mount with Richard Wollstonecroft. There will be coming one this week that in its place. I published Richard Wollstonecroft's review of his Cafe Locked Out. So a colleague, Michael Gray Griffith's new play, My Brother, My Brother, My Brother, which is it's already actually finished. So hopefully there are more shows for it. So remember, Richard is also a regular on Sam Newman's You Cannot Be Serious podcast. And I am back on Reality Check Radio with Paul Brennan for a Wilms report on Tuesday morning on his breakfast program. And Dewey DeBoer, his dialogue program on Reality Check Radio has actually been moved to Mondays from 12 p.m. New Zealand time, which is 2 p.m. Australian time. So it was sad to hear about the closure of TNT radio this week, but we do have Reality Check Radio, which is 100% listener supported in New Zealand, still doing great stuff. So until tomorrow night, stay safe, stay sane, stay optimistic, and stay warm or cool wherever you are in Australia. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Wilms Front. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows. And to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.